So everybody's logging on right now, watching us on Periscope. I appreciate it. We also have people that will be watching the recorded broadcast on YouTube. So thank you guys for watching. Format for today is I will have some questions here with Attorney Bowers that I will go through after we go through those questions that I have about the recent situation of shootings, the couple of shootings that we had recently this week, as well as the Dallas situation last night. Then I'm going to turn it back over to you guys that are watching live on Periscope and take some questions that you may have for Attorney Bowers to answer. So I said, Attorney Bowers, I appreciate you joining me here this early afternoon on a Friday.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to let everybody know who you are a little bit. Mr. Bowers has served 7 years with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. The final 3.5 of those years were with the Police Attorney's Office, and you are currently in private practice.
That's correct. Yeah, I enjoyed my time with CMPD, but it's time to move on and do some bigger and better things.
Okay. So I appreciate you joining us. So we're going to just start. Well, first I'm going to tell you guys, for me, I wanted to sit down with Attorney Bowers because this right now, this situation that we've been going through this week, to me seems like the most, I don't know what the word is. I've seen friends that I haven't seen before on social media talking about it. And it seems different than the Trayvon Martin case. It seems different than all the other cases that we had. It's just been building.
Right.
And it was supported, at least in my eyes, that it's a building case by what I saw last night in Dallas. Mm-hmm. You know, having 5 police officers shot. And I feel like a lot of people are frustrated. And I wanted to have you on to talk about should these things be going on or not. That's a different conversation to have. But I want to talk more about the legal process and what officers have the right to do and what they don't have the right to do. I know some of the information may be limited right now, but just want to shed some light. So let's go ahead and first thing that happened earlier this week was we had Alton Sterling, who was fatally shot by police in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Correct.
Social media quickly took that to the world for everybody to see and judge. And my first thoughts when I saw it was, man, that looks tough. And I also think about, I don't know if the media talks about it enough, would be every time I see anything like that happen, I think of 2 things. One is that's somebody's child.
Right.
There's a mom, there's a dad out there, and now your child's last moments have been caught on video, and it's instantly out there to everybody, and for you to see over and over again. And so that's the first thing I think about as well, the family. And then on the other side, he could potentially have kids as well, right, that will easily be able to see their father's last moments. But let's talk about that case. So and also, media only shows initially the result, right, the shooting of the death. And there's always things that lead up to the shooting, whether they're justified or not justified. So from what you've been able to see, talk about that case and what you've seen and how officers are trained to handle those situations.
Well, yeah, I like what you said initially, which is without a doubt, despite all of our frustrations and disappointments and things of that nature, you have to do the fact gathering. And I know we all want things fast, but if you want to do things the right way, you have to take your time, and you want to make sure that you gather all the evidence that's out there. A rush to judgment does not equate to justice for the individual that was shot, or even for the officer for that matter. I know we live in a society where we want it now, but in reality, these things take a great deal of time. There's a lot of statements to be gathered. There's a lot of video to be reviewed. There's medical reports, all this stuff that people are like, I don't care about any of that. I know what I saw with my eyes. But as it relates to the court system and as it relates to our current process in the United States of America, you have to go through those steps. Because if you rush to judgment and you don't go through those steps, then you'll find yourself in a situation where, quite frankly, just being candid, if you look at what's happening out in Baltimore, with that prosecutor. There are a lot of folk that said that they rushed to judgment in response to the social media outpour, and because of that, every case is being dismissed. She's over 3 at this point. And so you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you rushed in to make a decision. You want to take the time to do it the right way. So with that being said, as it relates to your question, what can an officer do in a situation like that? Well, if we were to walk through low and slow from the beginning on that video, all we know, and again, we're Monday morning quarterbacking here because we don't have anything. But the facts that are known publicly was that a person, apparently a homeless man, called 911 on the individual, stating that the individual brandished a gun. Some media reports said that this was after the homeless person had approached the gentleman several times requesting money. So I've actually taken that call many times myself when I was a patrol officer before becoming an attorney. So the first thing that you want to do when you arrive on the scene is make contact with the individual respectfully and start that dialogue.
The individual meaning the person made the call or the suspect?
You want to, it depends. That's a great question, because when you arrive, the person that made the call, especially in a situation like that, may or may not still be on the scene. In this particular case, they gave a description that was on point, so they saw the individual that they was looking for, and since he supposedly had a gun, in that case, you would go directly to that individual to talk to him. So in the videos, we don't have a lot of what happened before, how that conversation was going. And I know people will say, so what? We saw the end state. Well, yes, we saw the end state, but again, if we want to do this thing the right way, you can't skip any steps in the process. And so we don't know what happened. We don't know how that conversation went, but generally speaking, they would have approached this individual, and just because he had a gun on him does not make that against the law. I'm not very familiar with Louisiana's firearm laws, but a lot of states you can carry openly, or if you have a concealed weapon, you can carry it concealed so long as you have a permit.
And it seemed like from the video, I would say I would assume they didn't approach him aggressively, because when I think of aggressive, I would say guns were drawn, and then telling them to get on his knees or something like that, because they didn't have their guns drawn initially. I would assume from the video that they were just trying to talk to him at first, and then things escalated.
Right. So that's the assumption. But as we all know, and those are the things that we can't assume once we actually get into the courtroom.
Right.
That's all part of it. But generally speaking, that's a rather standard. We don't like to use the term routine, because that puts you in the mindset that this is just another call and nothing could happen. But this is a very typical call. So they would have approached him. They would have made contact, identified themselves, told him why they were present, and then the conversation would have went from there. Because they had gotten such a clear description, and because he was supposedly armed, at some point in the conversation, probably up front, they should have asked him, did he have anything on him that they needed to know about? And depending upon that response, would determine what happened next.
So let's assume potentially they asked or whatever, they didn't feel that he had a gun on him, so there's the scuffle that starts, and now they're wrestling with him, and they have him on the ground. And so in the video, you hear about a gun, and then shortly afterwards, he's been shot. So again, I know we don't have all the facts, but how justifiable? I won't even say that. When people watch, they go to say, why did they shoot him? He was on the ground.
Right.
Why didn't they get a stun gun? Why didn't they pull out a baton? You got all these other things. Why didn't they go to do that?
Right. So that's a great question and a great segue. Again, our job here is not to really do what's going on in the media right now and Monday morning quarterback that situation. But what I would like to do instead is kind of share what the law says, and maybe hear what the people say about it. If we have a law that the people can't understand, then we have a law that is not serving its purpose. The law is very clear as it relates to when an officer can and cannot use deadly force. We have a couple of landmark Supreme Court cases that reign supreme today. Tennessee versus Garner being one, and Graham versus Connor, which actually originated right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, address reasonableness of force. And most states have even taken it a step further, and within their own state laws have defined, based on these rulings, when an officer can use deadly force. Generally speaking, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, an officer may use deadly force when he has a reasonable, let's highlight that word reasonable because you will have to come back to it, a reasonable fear that his life or a third person's life is in immediate danger. Not only if their life is in danger, even if there is an immediate reasonable fear that serious bodily harm is about to come to that officer or about to come to a third party, an officer can use deadly force. So that word reasonable, every time we look at something, we have to be able to define what does reasonable mean. So that is what was kind of further defined, I think, in the Graham v. Connor decision. It says the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than with a 20/20 vision of hindsight. So in other words, the Supreme Court justice here is saying, hey, look, all of us can sit back and Monday morning quarterback when we're not the one that's wrestling on the scene. But we're not going to determine reasonableness based on what we see on Facebook, what we decide here in the courtroom. We're going to determine reasonableness based on what another officer similarly situated would do. It says the calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation. The test of reasonableness is not capable of precise definition or mechanical application, meaning that they tried their best to tell us what was reasonable, but at the end of the day, the court kind of looks at if I was an individual that was involved in an officer-involved shooting, would you as an officer, another reasonable officer, similarly situated, meaning we have the same training, we have the same level of experience, would another officer in my shoes make the same decision that I would make? If the answer to that question is yes, then the use of force is justified, even if the situation turned out not to be what you thought it was. For example, if I'm reaching into my pocket and like I'm going to get you now, officer, and I'm reaching and all I have is keys, when I've just told you that I'm about to assault you and I'm reaching in my pocket, I don't have a lot of time to make a decision as to whether what I'm going to do next. So would another officer in that position make the same decision that I would make? So what I would like to say is when we look at the law and when we look at these situations, this is the part where most American citizens don't understand and are not familiar with because they've never had any, most of them have not had any training or any experience in those particular situations to understand what's reasonable and what's not. All of that said, please know. What I will say is, what we've seen here is quite atrocious in my humble opinion. But no matter what it looks like.
Well, atrocious in the sense of, do you feel like those actions that were taken by those officers in Baton Rouge were warranted?
I mean, at initial glance, I would say no, but then I'm doing what I hate what other people do. I'm saying that just based off of just what I saw on the clip.
Yeah, but judgment is going to have to be made. The same question I'm asking you. Like a judge, they will be before a judge,
correct,
and they will have to make. Now, granted, they're going to have a lot more information. Right? And so, what scenarios would that shooting in Baton Rouge have been legitimate? And before you answer, I want to talk to people on Periscope real quick that invite you guys to share this broadcast with your followers. So if you're on an Android phone, you can swipe up, hit that share broadcast button. You can swipe it to the left. If you're on an iPhone, hit the share broadcast. And at the end of these questions, we're going to take some questions from you guys with Attorney Bowers here, if you have them. So if you got some questions, just patiently wait for us for a second, and then we'll get them over to Attorney Bowers. But
yeah, so a scenario where I would say that type of force would be reasonable. We actually had a case very similar to that here in Charlotte within the last 5 years, where officers were attempted to arrest an individual that either had an outstanding warrant for a variety of different felonies. I forgot the exact facts, but the bottom line is that he fled. The officers caught up with him on or near a front porch, and as the officers began to wrestle with him, two officers, one individual, the individual was actually able to reach and make contact with his firearm and was attempting to pull it out. In these facts, the officers were actually trying to hold him down from getting the gun out. But the officer, one was high, if you will, maybe in his upper part of his body, and one was low. The officer that was trying to keep the firearm from being placed in a position where the individual could use it was losing his grip, and he was screaming for dear life, shoot him, I can't hold him, shoot him. And it was one of those situations where it was clear and evident that this individual had reached for the gun. Not only had he reached for the gun, he was attempting to use it on officers, and before he was able to, pull the trigger, officers actually, used deadly force and ended that situation. There was not a lot of media fanfare about that one. It was actually rather straightforward. So that would be an example. The facts is different from what we know in Louisiana. In the case that I just gave you, was the individual obviously made contact with the weapon. He obviously pulled it out, and an officer doesn't have to wait till you start spraying bullets to decide, if I don't make a decision right now, bad things are going to happen.
So is it reasonable to say in Louisiana, whether or not he actually saw it, but by the officer indicating that was a gun, that escalated that situation?
So here's the challenge: is just because he had a gun does not give an officer the right to use deadly force.
But with that, it is fair to say that would put the other officers on edge to say, okay, something deadly could happen because now he has a gun.
If you're wrestling, let's just take the legalese aside and just common sense. If me and you are tussling right now, and all of a sudden in the middle of the tussle somebody yells out gun, absolutely, it takes it up to the highest level of I need to do something, and I need to do it right now.
All right, so I'm going to give you two scenarios to go through if you can. He says that he saw a gun and now they're wrestling.
Right.
Why, not saying he should have, but what do you think would have caused him to then go into the point of deadly force in that situation? Well, they say he has a gun, they're still wrestling. It didn't seem like anything had been pulled out at that point. We're just speculating. But the gun was pulled. Why would you speculate that went like that? Not saying it was right or wrong, but why would you speculate that went that way?
Well, see, I think that's a question that I don't think any of us can answer. I think that's a question that all of us are waiting on. What I will say is that this is a perfect segue to my thoughts as it relates to these situations. Most times we often go to the race factor, and cultural bias is a part of who we all are. But at the end of the day, a lot of these situations they start with cultural bias a lot of times, but also just go back to good old tactics, techniques, and procedures. And in this particular case, the officer, whether his fear was reasonable or not will be determined. But I would suggest that the officer was afraid. Now, that does not justify his actions. That does not find his actions unjust. Right. I would say, as a human being, he was wrestling with somebody, and his partner one partner yelled out gun, and he was afraid.
No, I don't know if you know. Was the same officer that yelled gun the same officer that shot? Or was
that's a great question. I watched both of the videos. The initial video, you saw the officer that pulled out his gun and basically had it at his head, chest area, and it looked like he was the one that fired. But when I saw the second video, it looked like the individual that did not have the hat on was the one that fired. But again, that was just me looking at it on my phone, and not from a evidence perspective. Just I was doing something, I saw it really quick, so I have to look back at the video. But either way, I just think, without a doubt, this guy, I just don't believe, a lot of people will use the narrative that, Officer Smith has decided today he was going to go out and shoot African American. I think in most of these situations, 99.9% of the officers wake up that day and they go do their job. Everybody has common sense. Everybody knows that if you are involved in an officer-involved shooting, your life is over. Whether you win the case or lose the case, your career is most definitely over. Your life is over. So I can tell you that the worst person in the world, the worst officer in the world, did not wake up in the morning and decide, I'm going to go ruin my life. I'm going to have to go put my parents in hiding, my kids in hiding. I'm going to have to move. I'm going to have to be unemployed just because I don't like people of another race. That is not it. So then you have to ask the question, what is it? And I believe that a lot of times in those tight quarter situations, sometimes some officers, and I refuse to say on this particular case, but some officers are making decisions just based on training and based on fear. So a lack of training sometimes, and sometimes they are just quite simply afraid.
Okay. Now I see a few comments coming up. We're not going to be able to get to them yet, but I'm probably going to try to wrap up with him within the next 5 minutes. And hopefully you guys will be able to stay on, and then whatever questions you have for Attorney Bowers about these cases this week, we'll be able to ask him. So if you're there, please hold. And if you're also there, I invite you to share this broadcast, because I really want to educate a lot of people on the training of officers, what things they may have to deal with, so that you guys can individually think about, draw your own conclusions, and ultimately the judicial system will decide. But let's move on to the second case. That first case with the guy in Baton Rouge, I'll say for myself, I want to talk to you more before I drew my own conclusion, because I remember seeing a video, and there's lots of stuff out there on the internet that said, hey people, don't be foolish that just because a gun wasn't brought out of his pocket, that he couldn't shoot you. If you got a small gun, you can still reach in your pocket. Like I got something in my pocket right now, and I can fire a shot off. Now I might say, why would I want to shoot my leg? But if I want to kill you, I don't mind shooting my leg or possibly hitting my leg to get you off of me and escape. So that situation in Baton Rouge, I just felt like it was hard to see from that angle. But if he yelled gun and they're wrestling with him, and I don't know why this guy's continuing to resist. Of course, that's another topic I'm going to try to stay away from.
That's another topic.
But it's still unfortunate. So we'll go to the next case, which I believe happened on Wednesday in Minnesota. Again, online we first see where she starts recording after he's been shot. So we don't know what all happened before then. I still don't. Have you heard much detail about what happened before?
I would say again, trying to do my best not to make a conclusion without having any information other than what we all have. But for the sake of conversation, this one clearly looks, in my opinion, a lot worse than Louisiana. We've seen a case like this in South Carolina, and that officer was charged rather quickly. I believe he was a state trooper. I think it was down in Columbia.
I think it was Columbia.
South Carolina at a gas station where an officer pulled over an individual, and he was a young officer, hadn't been on very long, what we refer as a rookie officer. The individual got out of the car. Sometimes people stop and then get out. Some people stay in. He got out, and it made the officer nervous, and the officer was giving him commands. He needed to see his license and things of that nature. So the individual went to reach inside the vehicle to retrieve it, and the officer panicked, for some reason concluded that the guy was going for a weapon, and he shot him. Unfortunately, I don't think the individual died in that particular case, but that was just, the individual officer was fired, and he was prosecuted rather quickly. Again, in Minnesota, we only saw the tail end, so we don't know what happened, but by all accounts, and even by the officer's demeanor on the scene, like some of his comments immediately after, it appears that this one is going to be rather clear cut that the officer just totally overreacted. So you ask yourself why. Sure, you could take the easy route. Well, he saw a black person, he decided to shoot him. That's fine if you want to go that way, but I like common sense and practicality. I'm sure this particular officer, had a family. He has a wife. Maybe he has some kids. Maybe he had a ball game to go to that evening. It's just shocking to me how many people would believe that a person has woke up and decided to throw their whole life away just because they don't like another individual. I hate you so much that I want to lose my whole life and do this. So for me, if that's not the issue, then why? Why does this continue to happen?
So you would go to say more so, race, there was different races involved.
Yes.
But it wasn't you're black. It was more that I have a fear of what you're gonna do. Not necessarily like you're black and I don't like you, but it's black and again, I'm just going to that person's mindset.
There's a big difference, in my opinion, and I think if you look at the definition between just a racist, hateful person and cultural biases that we all have. And I think a lot of departments are working on cultural biases, because if you come from Montana, if you will, and you had zero exposure to people of other ethnicities, and then all of a sudden you move from Montana to the big city, Atlanta. You're down here and you've had no exposure to people of other cultures. Only thing you've seen is what you've heard on the television, because most of the time in the media, if they're going to put it on the news, it's usually something negative. So you've seen the negative stereotype, or maybe you've heard some other things, this or that nature, things of that nature. I don't care who you are, it will start to shape and form how you think about people. I can say that as well as for me, it's for all of us. So you have that in the back of your head, and then you make this encounter with this individual. The people didn't like it, but I think it was the governor of Minnesota that said, had this individual been white, he would have lived. Why would he say that? He's not saying that the officer hated black people that wanted to execute a black person. He's saying that his cultural bias alarm would have not gone off had this had been an old grandfather, NRA member with a firearm. Instead, it was a young African American male that probably fit the stereotype, if you will. And so in his head, his alarm is already going off, so he's nervous. And so when the guy reaches, he overreacts and he discharges his firearm. Again,
I like cultural bias alarm. I don't know if you trademark that or not, but I like that.
Well, yeah, it just kind of popped in my head. But yeah, I think it's real. I think if we all were to sit back and assess ourselves, we all have cultural biases based on what our parents have taught us, maybe people we went to school with, so on and so forth. But we have to honestly look at those. And as it relates to training, especially with police officers, we got to do a great job of making sure that some of those cultures, you can't eliminate them, but you got to deal with them head on. And I'm not sure we're doing a great enough job of doing that.
Okay. I'm going to speed through these last two, because I know some people may have been holding on Periscope. Hopefully you guys have shared the broadcast. Again, if you will share the broadcast, I would really, really appreciate it, as it's a very hot topic in America right now with the police shootings, and then also the police being shot last night in Dallas. If you shared the broadcast, again, on Android phones, you want to swipe up, hit the share broadcast button, and then on an iPhone or Apple, you'll want to swipe it to the left or right, and then hit that share broadcast. We're going to take some questions from you guys for Attorney Bowers. So same situation, a question as the first case. Let's look at two, and there's limited knowledge. Mm-hmm. Give me both the why did he shoot him and how it could have gone the other way, in your opinion, with the limited facts that you have. Why would the shooting have been justified in Minnesota?
Well, based on my training and experience in military tactics and then police tactics, that one was a little bit challenging. The only exception would have been, again, going back to the law that we read, there would have to have been some factor that led the officer to believe that his life was in danger, or a third party's life was in danger. Just making up something. The only thing that you could think of in that case was if the individual reached for his gun, and even then, because the individual was in the vehicle and he was outside, all he would have had to do is step back. And I'm not even sure what led to his weapon being drawn, just because the individual, I've pulled over numerous individuals that have firearms, and when they tell you that they have a firearm, you have several options. You can ask the individual to step out of the vehicle, and you retrieve the firearm is what you do, because you normally don't say, hand me the gun. That's not how that works. Some people normally say, okay, thank you, sir, let me get this. You put it on the dashboard, and when you hand them the weapon back, you'll usually unload all the rounds and from the magazine, and wish them a great day. And sometimes you'll even put the weapon in the trunk, say,
you get it when you stop.
Get it when you stop. And so it's hard to come up with a scenario in which that would be justified. The only thing that would be justified had the individual actually reached and grabbed the gun and started to turn toward the officer, which facts here are clearly not present.
Right.
So I'm not even comfortable making up a scenario in that particular case. That's
So
a tough one. That's
a tough one. So, assuming that, I think the girlfriend said that they told the officer he had a gun. So assuming that was true, they told the officer that he had a gun. I almost feel like I don't know what the guy could have done. If I told you I had a gun and I didn't threaten you,
Right.
and again, we haven't heard statements. I don't know if there's been a police report released on statements from the officer, but if he told me he had a gun, I don't know what he's to do next.
I mean, that's it. I mean, North Carolina, every state's concealed weapon laws are slightly different.
But let's go, I'm sorry, but the officer was heard screaming. I told him not to move.
Right.
So I guess maybe we could try to draw up, hey, I'm already scared. You just told me you had a gun, but I'm saying don't move.
That's not it. You still, just because you tell me not to move and I move, that still doesn't meet the standard for.
But you have a gun, so why can't I be scared for my life
In
that
this
I told
case,
you not to move?
Was the gun
You
was
moved,
the gun in my hand, or was the gun still in the glove box?
but you also said that you're not going to wait until that gun's pointed at you.
I'm not going to wait till it's pointed at me, but the challenge of being a police officer, I need to make till you make some type of reasonable, actionable step, towards towards retrieving that firearm. Just because you make a move, that's just not it.
All right, so we here that had a technical difficulty there, but okay, so let's go on the other side. Why shouldn't he not have pulled it, which you kind of seem like you already talked about?
Yeah, I think it was, again, we don't have any evidence, but generally speaking, again, based on those cases that we talked about earlier in the broadcast, would a reasonable officer in that same situation feel as if his life was in danger or a third party's life was in danger? And just because you feel that way, is it reasonable? And I would say, based on what we've seen, it does not appear that was very, very reasonable at all. There are no factors to suggest that it was reasonable for him to have that fear. Even though he had that fear, I'm sure the fear was real, but it was unreasonable. And if you discharge a firearm at someone out of an unreasonable fear, then that's going to be found to be unlawful.
All right. I'm going to jump to Periscope and see if we got some questions. So if you guys are there patiently waiting to ask Attorney Bowers some questions, I'm about to walk over to the camera now and ask him these questions for you guys. And as I wait to see if there's any questions that are going to come up, I will also talk about the Dallas situation, which was last night having 5 officers shot dead, and then 12 officers, I believe, are the number that were injured. Is it tough to become a police officer these days?
It's not tough to become one.
Well, not to become one, but
it's tough to be one. That's for sure. I mean, it's I don't know if you recall after 9/11, society was proud of first responders, police, fire, and things of that nature, and we've shifted now to not so much. So it's very tough.
So again, I have Attorney Bowers here. We are now taking your questions here live on Periscope. So if you guys want to type in any questions that you may have about the recent police-involved shootings this week, one on Tuesday in Louisiana, and then one on Wednesday in Minnesota, then go ahead and ask those questions. I do want to ask you one question about the Dallas shooting. I was watching the police, they actually periscoped the Dallas police this morning, a news conference, and they described how they handled the suspect shooter. Right. With a robot going over and then a bomb exploding and killing the guy. Right. So when I first heard that, I thought to myself, wow, we use bombs now on people? So can you tell us about police using bombs on people?
Well, you want me to give you the raw and the real on that? Well, here's the situation. When an officer has the right to use deadly force, as we talked about, meaning that there's an imminent fear of the officer's life being in danger or somebody else's life being in danger. Deadly force is, by any means necessary to get the job done. And in this case, we had a sniper that was in a fixed position, if you will, and any officer running in was going going to put his life in danger. So the safest course of action was to use that device to eliminate the threat. So I know it's shocking to the conscience because you can't be, it's just hard to imagine a police department doing something like that, but I think that's something that's very rare and was probably more of a military tactic than anything else. But we don't have a lot of snipers running around in America these days either.
So again, we're still taking your questions as you guys are joining live on Periscope. Please feel free to ask Attorney Bowers here any questions that you may have about the police shootings that have been going on this week. Continuing on about the bomb, okay? So every city in America has bombs that they could detonate on people?
Well, I don't know. I didn't have, and I'll be honest, I wasn't a SWAT officer, so I'm not sure what their arsenal consists of. I'm familiar with the robots, but yeah, so I would not know.
But if they have a bomb, they could use it. I mean, this seems like very, 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 very.
This is a very rare situation.
Very extreme.
Always go back to the factors surrounding why they use the bomb. You know, raise your hand if you want to be the one that's going to run up on this well-trained individual that has already, you know, killed 5 people, and you're going to be the next. And nope. So.
All right, but. And again, we're taking you guys' questions here on Periscope if you have any. For Attorney Bowers here, you had SWAT team certainly on the scene.
Right.
No SWAT member is capable of shooting a guy.
Well, again, without being able to see where he was. Apparently, he was in a pretty fixed position. There was a lot of gunfire exchange, and the gunfire. He had a lot of what we would call cover and concealment. Apparently, meaning he was able to hide, and also he was able to protect himself. So the exchange of gunfire was not working to reduce the threat, and the threat was imminent. He continued to say, so long as I am here, I'm going to kill white people and white officers. So with all those things considered, if you have an option that will allow you not to put another life in danger to eliminate a threat of somebody who's in actively killing people, then hey, that's what you need to do.
Let's use a bomb.
Hey, by any means necessary, unfortunately.
All right. Well, do y'all think we would be going into martial law? That was a question. I'm going to give you all the questions we got. So go ahead and respond to Attorney Bowers.
No, you know, we look at, I don't know if in our American history, can somebody tell me if and when that is, been enacted? I know we've had some natural disasters that kind of put some limits on our freedoms to respond to those national disasters, but I don't think we are at a national disaster point just yet. It's tragic as that as well. It's still an isolated incident. But if that were to continue to happen, then, you know, I'm sure that everything would be on the table. But we all know that if we start talking about taking away people's freedoms, you're going to get more angry people than you ever imagined from all across the spectrum. So I couldn't imagine anything like that happening.
Last night in Charlotte, I know we had some protests, and I don't know how familiar you are with those protests, but there was a sit down by the epicenter, probably a college and Trade Street. Mm-hmm. How was it handled? Do you know the result of that?
Yeah. So when I was with CMPD during the Democratic National Convention, the tactic was simply to allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights and just basically stand around and make sure everything remained peaceful. So I'm sure last night that was the case. Matter of fact, most of the time here in the city of Charlotte, even if the individual does in fact break the law, such as by blocking a street in protest, most times the officers here are going to give great leeway before they take any action. They're actually going to redirect traffic. They want to take alternative approaches because they want to give people the opportunity to express themselves.
Did they let those people continue to block the street, or did they have to try to remove them?
Yes, I'm not sure about last night specifically, but
right.
I know that during the Democratic National Convention, they let people block streets for quite some time. They just redirected traffic, and after a while, they went home.
All right, I think we got time for 2 more questions. I saw one question came through about Black Lives Matter, and if you guys could retype that question, I would like to ask that to Attorney Bowers here. I know it's along the lines of Black Lives Matter, so I'm going to give you a second if you could try to retype that question, And I will ask Mr. Bowers while we're on camera if he'll consider coming back to our lovely studio once some more of this information shows his head.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
All right, I haven't seen the question come through back, but I'm going to try to ask it. I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question, Mr. Bowers. Why do cops keep killing black people? It seems like it is designed.
Well, you know, that's a question that, you know, I can't take lightly, because I'm sure that you know, honestly and sincerely feel that way based on what you have seen and what you have, you know, have witnessed. And there's not a lot of trust for the government from a lot of people, black, white, Jew, Gentile, you name it. You know, however, again, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, I would challenge the thought that there was individuals that would wake up in the morning and decide, I'm going to go kill a black person. Because again, if you ever go and look up any one of these officers, although they may sometimes get cleared and it's shocking for us, if you ever look at what happens to them, I actually literally know, saw them personally. I know one that was ended up being a assistant brick mason because nobody would hire a white officer. Why would he do that? You know, why would he couldn't even provide for his family because it was paying like under the table job just so he could try to make it. So it's hard to believe that anybody would intentionally do that. But again, I think it happens. It does happen, and I think it happens more so on the lines of fear, lack of training sometimes, and cultural biases when dealing with certain people in the community.
All right, so I appreciate you asking that question. All right, we got some more questions. All right. I'm gonna give the GO one more question. Do you feel like they should be cops if they are scared of an unarmed African American?
No. If you're the name of this job is you know, it requires the use of physical force. There will be times, and I've had those experiences where individuals say, you know what, today, officer, I don't like you. Knuckle up, and we're gonna dance. And you can't shoot a guy because of that. You just can't. So no, if that is a factor, which kind of goes back to, you know, back in the day. You know, I don't want to get on the whole rant, but back in the day they had size standards, and they didn't even have a lot of female officers. Not saying that that's right, because I know there are some great officers that are females, even greater than I could have ever dreamed of being. But back in the day they had standards in place for size and strength because the job required you to be physical with people, and that physicality, the last resort was using a firearm. So if you're afraid to get physical with people, if you're afraid to use other tactics other than your firearm, then no, you shouldn't, in my opinion, be a police officer.
And I was gonna round up, but again, I wanted to do this for a lot of purposes, to educate people and to have this great resource. So I'm gonna actually continue to ask questions for a few here. And I will ask, we're now offline of Periscope because we were broadcasting so long, but we're still live on YouTube.
Okay.
So we're gonna come over here and ask those two remaining questions. How can we bridge the gap with the cultural biases that we have? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we just gotta spend time together and get to know one another. It's really that simple. I mean, when you look at the things that define culture, we're very segregated in those areas. You think about, you know, the church setting. For those of us that, you know, go to church Sunday morning, it's still the most segregated hour in our country. You know, most people are going to go to church where they culturally click, and usually that's going to be based on race. A lot of our other activities, again, we separate ourselves by culture. So if we're really going to bridge that gap, you know, we got to start spending some time with each other. They've tried that a little bit through community policing initiatives, but I think we just got to continue to step that up, so that officers will learn that hey, every person with a particular culture is not a threat. Just because he looks this way, talks this way, he is a highly intelligent individual, and it just happens to be how he decides to express himself. All
right, the final question that I took before our Periscope died. was, I think, pretty profound, probably the way a lot of people are feeling these days. What should we do if we get pulled over by the police officers?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a long one, and I hope we can revisit that one the next time. But I would say, number one is, I'm a huge believer in accountability on both sides, meaning the individual that's being encountered by the officer as well as the officer has a responsibility. You as the individual, first thing that you need to understand is that the law requires you to be compliant with lawful commands. And also remember, at the end of the day, a traffic stop is not a courtroom. You're not going to win your case by arguing with the officer on the street. You're not going to win your case by, cussing him out. You'll win your case in the courtroom. As a matter of fact, the more respectful you are in the situation, the better it will work out in your favor as it goes into the future. So be respectful, be compliant. We have to be compliant if we don't like police encounters, and make sure that we do what we need to do as far as with our motor vehicles and things of that nature. We don't like to be stopped. Be compliant so that you don't have to get stopped for a busted tail light. So that you don't have to. I know it happens. It happened to me. I've been pulled over for it. So I'm not talking as one who's never been on the other side, but I'm just saying these are tips that we can do to avoid those encounters. But if you do have those encounters, just make sure you maintain your respect, and everybody will be able to leave it peacefully.
All right. So, Attorney Bowers, for those who may have some other questions, maybe legal matters, they want to get some consultation from you, how would they do so?
Yeah, they can reach me at my website, www.wobolaw.com. That's www.wob as in boy, law.com.
All right, so I think I might have convinced you to come back. So
Yeah, we can.
I think we'll try to, I'll have to talk with this man about his schedule, but if you come back, I would like to focus that next session more on taking questions from the people.
Okay.
I think we had a lot of questions that came in at the end, but I think that would be pretty useful for the community to hear, to be able to ask their questions to somebody like yourself. So.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on, sir. And everybody, thanks for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the video, and even if you have some comments that you want to leave on there, leave those comments and we will try to watch them. So this is Chris Jenkins from CharlotteVibe.com.